Welcome, everyone. This is our second lecture in the Growth and Development series. Today we will talk about toddlers. Let's get started straight away. So first and foremost, the toddler age group are 1-year-olds to 3-year-olds. In this period of time, their physical growth slows down, but things like language start to develop very, very quickly. First and foremost, though, let's talk about the growth that they do have. Our toddler's height will increase by about 3 inches per year, and their weight will increase by about 4 to 6 pounds per year. Now remember, every child is going to be different, but we need to be plotting their height and weight on the growth chart appropriate for their age and sex at every primary care office visit so that we are sure that they are growing with accordance to their growth chart and not falling behind. Their head is not going to be growing quite as quickly as their body. The head circumference will start to be closer and closer to their chest circumference until it's equal at about 1 to 2 years of age. Remember, with our infants, their head was proportionally way, way, way bigger than their whole body. And that's gradually going to start to even out as they age on. So in toddlerhood, their bodies are going to be growing faster than their heads to start catching up. Last thing I want to mention is that this is the growth period where the anterior fontanelle will close, and this occurs between 9 and 18 months. So fine and gross motor development, tons of new skills are being learned by toddlers. A few milestones that you'll want to make sure toddlers can hit. They should be able to hold crayons and pencils so that they can color and draw. Granted, they might just be circles, shapes, stick figures, nothing fancy, but they should be able to have the grasp to hold and control those crayons and pencils. They should be able to copy a circle onto paper, build a tower of blocks 8 to 10 blocks high, clap their hands, unbutton a button, work a zipper. Riding a tricycle, they should be getting there towards the end of toddlerhood, around 3 years of age, and around 2 years of age, they should be able to jump up and down. So we do want to check in about these milestones at primary care appointments to make sure kids are developing these fine and gross motor skills. As you can see, there's going to be a lot more independence starting to bud at this age with the buttoning and unbuttoning, working a zipper. A lot of kids will want to start dressing themselves, and we want to encourage this independence and try to help them gain these fine and growth motor skills. Next, we'll move on to language development, which is really where toddlers start to take off. Language development grows immensely during the toddler stage. Some milestones that they begin to be able to accomplish are following simple directions. Now, nothing complex, but go to timeout, stay in your room, come to the dinner table, simple directions. They should also be able to link words together by the time they're 2 years old, so they should be speaking in more than just one-word sentences. Now, it might only be 2 or 3, maybe 4 words, but they should be able to link at least 2 words together by the time they're 2. They will have a vocabulary of about 300 words by the time they're 2, which is pretty incredible. They'll also be able to identify objects and body parts. Nothing crazy, but heads, shoulders, knees, and toes, their favorite toys, basic household objects. That vocabulary will be growing every day. All right, next on to everyone's favorite, the social and cognitive developmental stages. Remember, you really need to learn these for the NCLEX, so let's review. Erikson's stage for toddlerhood is autonomy versus shame and doubt. In this stage, children start to develop a sense of personal control over physical skills. Remember that buttoning and unbuttoning a button, zippering, and that gives them some independence. They start to want to do things like dress themselves. When they're successful in those tasks, they feel that independence, and it leads to that sense of autonomy. That's what we want them to accomplish. But when they're not successful, they feel like a failure, and they start to have a lot of shame and self-doubt, which is not what we want for our toddlers. A major task that Erikson talks a lot about in the autonomy versus shame and doubt stage of development is toilet training. This is a big one that toddlers want to accomplish, and if they become independent in toilet training, they will feel really independent. They'll have that autonomy. And if they're unable to accomplish it or have a lot of struggles and are made to feel bad about themselves, they might experience that shame and self-doubt. So we'll talk more about toilet training on the next slide, but a few terms I want to go over. These two different types of play, these are terms you might see on the NCLEX, so I want you to know what they mean. Parallel play is when children play adjacent to one another or next to one another, but they're not trying to influence one another's behaviors. So Tommy's playing blocks here, Sue's playing with her dolls next to him, and they're interested in each other. They're looking at each other, but they're not trying to influence each other in any way. They're playing independently, but alongside each other. That is common during the toddler phase. The second one here is symbolic play, and that is where children use objects, actions, or ideas to represent other objects, actions, or ideas as play. So maybe they pick up a block and use it to pretend it is a cell phone. They use that symbolism. And really, they're representing what they see their parents and their peers doing in the outside world and using the objects around them as symbolism. So both parallel play and symbolic play are characteristic of the toddler phase of development, and you should know those definitions and be able to differentiate between those types of play. All right, let's talk a little bit more about toilet training, since that's such an important part of the Erikson stage of development, that autonomy versus shame and doubt. So toilet training is the big task that typically happens during that toddler stage of development between 1 and 3 years old, but it's very important to note that you should not start toilet training your child before they are ready. They don't gain control of those sphincter muscles necessary to control going to the bathroom until around 18 to 24 months old. So the child will really show you signs when they're ready to begin. For example, they'll wake up from their nap dry. They'll tell you that they need to go to the bathroom, and they'll be able to remain dry for at least 2 hours throughout the day. If those things aren't happening yet, they don't have control of those sphincter muscles, and toilet training is going to result in a lot of shame and self-doubt because the child will physically be unable to do what you're asking them to do. So that's the first point I want to drive home. A few things to mention about education for parents during toilet training. Parents should never leave their child alone on the toilet. First and foremost, they could fall off and it could be a safety risk. Secondly, though, the child could feel abandoned and scared and start not wanting to go to the bathroom and holding it because they're afraid of being left alone on the toilet. You should limit their time sitting on the toilet to 5 to 8 minutes at a time. If they're going to be able to go, that will be enough time, and we don't want to prolong the experience and make it a negative experience. You also want to get them either their own toilet or a stool or something to accommodate them so that the toilet's the right size. Their feet need to be able to sit on something so that they're in a proper position and able to do what they need to do. And then lastly, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that this is an excellent time to teach hand hygiene to your little ones. The proper times to wash your hands, really driving home those habits of washing your hand every time you go to the bathroom. All right, let's move on to some common injuries we see in toddlers and continue talking about these educational points that are so important for parents of toddlers. Okay, toddlers have a lot of ways that they commonly become injured. Most frequently, we see falls, burns, drowning, and poisoning. This is simply because toddlers are now more mobile, they're interested in their environment, they're getting into everything, and they don't know that it's dangerous. So you really cannot take your eyes off these kiddos. Ways to help prevent these common injuries are locking up dangerous substances. So that means any medications, cleaning supplies, laundry detergent, all of those chemicals you use in the garage, out in the yard, and such need to be locked up so that no child can get to them. Gates should be at the top and bottom of the stairs to prevent any falls. And you should never, ever, ever, ever leave a bathtub unsupervised. Even if there's only a couple inches of water in it, you turn around just for a second to go get something, the kid's not in the bath, they can make their way into the bath, fall face forward, and drown in less than 2 inches of water. It happens so much more often than you would think. So this is an incredibly important educational point for teaching our parents of toddlers how to prevent these horrible, horrible injuries. Also very important as far as community health and ways that we can do some preventative education. I would say this is probably my number one point of discussion with parents of toddlers. All right, last thing I want to touch on with toddlers is nutrition. Toddlers are very picky eaters, and we often have a lot of questions about these from parents. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to just dive into that nutrition a little bit more. So like I said, they're the classic picky eaters. Because of this, iron deficiency anemia is actually relatively common in this age group. They just don't eat a lot of iron-rich foods. So some foods we can offer them are iron-fortified cereals, leafy greens, red meats, fish, and beans. Of course, those are probably not the like mac and cheese and spaghetti that toddlers want to eat. So incorporating meals that have these types of foods in them more frequently is a good way to increase the iron toddlers are getting in their diet. One other thing is that you really want to continue using full fat milk until the child is at least 2. They need those increased calories and those increased fatty acids, so skim or part skim milk should not be substituted until later in age. And we also discourage parents from using food as a reward. That tends to create a negative relationship with food, and we do not recommend that. Okay, those are all of my toddler points. Let's wrap this up with an NCLEX question. You are providing education to a group of parents about toilet training their toddler age children. Which of the following educational points should you include? Select all that apply. A. Most children are ready to begin toilet training between 12 and 18 months old. B. Stay with the child while they are trying to use the toilet. C. Limit sitting on the toilet to 5 to 8 minutes at a time. And D. A child should be able to stay dry throughout the night before you begin toilet training. Okay, we just did this slide, so hopefully you all get it correct. Take a few seconds to think it through. Okay, I hope you all got this one right. The answer was B and C. B was correct because that was a very good educational point. Parents should stay with their child while they are trying to use the toilet. Toilet training may be scary for some toddlers, and it's a new and unfamiliar item that they're learning about. They're learning about their bodies and controlling something that they haven't controlled before. So it's important for their psychosocial development for them to feel supported, and provide education to stay with the child while they're using the toilet is a good educational point. C was your other correct answer. Parents should limit sitting on the toilet to 5 to 8 minutes at a time. It can be a frustrating task for toddlers, and to foster their autonomy instead of increasing frustration, we should keep toilet time to 5 to 8 minutes. If they can't go after then, it's unlikely they will be able to do so. They could just not have a full bladder, and they shouldn't be forced to keep sitting on the toilet if they're not going to be successful. A and D were incorrect answers. For A, that statement was simply incorrect. Children are not typically ready to begin toilet training between 12 and 18 months of age. They don't develop control of their sphincter muscles until 18 to 24 months of age, and that is when the child will be ready. Signs that they are ready are waking up dry from their naps, telling you that they need to go, and the ability to stay dry for at least 2 hours during the daytime. That brings us right into D, our other incorrect answer. It is not true that children should be able to stay dry throughout the night before you begin toilet training. Remaining dry throughout the night often doesn't even occur until 4 to 5 years of age, and children are typically ready to begin potty training before that, about 18 to 24 months of age, like we said before. All right, that is my longer than expected growth and development lecture on toddlers. I hope that answers all your points. It's a period where a lot of things are happening, so hopefully you got some good educational points to provide the parents of your patients. These are also points that can be asked on the NCLEX, and remember that those Erikson stages are often a source of many NCLEX questions. So review those, send us a note if you have any questions at all, and good luck with your studying.